Okay, tonight we want to try to give you some principles that we'll try to illustrate as we move along. First principle is the majority is always wrong. The majority of the people are absolutely clueless as to what is going on in this country. They get all their information from the mainline media, from Washington, from Wall Street, from the Fed, et cetera, et cetera. And the fact that most of that is propaganda and disinformation goes right over their heads. Okay, but that's not true just in our time. It was true in the Roman Empire when the majority wanted bread and circuses and so forth. And I think that the majority of the people could very possibly elect a very, very socialist president in the upcoming presidential elections. So I think if you'll study history, study financial markets, you'll find most people going the wrong direction at the wrong time. And I think that is certainly true today. Okay, our next principle is that Americans are perpetual optimists. We like good news. We don't like bad news. We don't like people who bring us bad news. People who bring us bad news are very, very unpopular. And that's why the kinds of things that we talk about on our weekly program on the internet, in my newsletter, my monthly newsletter, on radio programs, and in conferences we speak in, are not optimistic. Sometimes they're pretty difficult and pretty heavy, and the great majority of the people simply would not listen. It's not positive enough. People want to hear what they want to hear, and they will switch off people who have a negative message that they think is not compatible with their hearing what they want to hear. To win the battle for investment survival, you need to avoid being an optimist or a pessimist, but be a realist, and that's what we try to do with our newsletter and our other communications with our clients and people around the country, and indeed around the world, is to try to help them have a realistic view of the world we live in. Complacency is self-satisfaction accompanied by unawareness of actual dangers or deficiencies. Tremendous amount of complacency in our country today about the dangers we face economically, politically, and so forth, about the dangers we face from terrorism, about the dangers we face from a collapsing financial system, and so forth. The complacency, I think, is actually higher today than I've ever seen it. Always mistrust the obvious. There are so many things happening in the world that are not obvious. The politicians are telling you not the truth. Hardly ever. As a matter of fact, you can almost conclude that the opposite of what they're saying is what's normally going to be happening. So mistrust the obvious, regardless of what you hear from people on the campaign trail, from Washington, from Wall Street, from the Fed, et cetera, et cetera. There is usually a very, very different situation or agenda that's taking place. Very few events are spontaneous or accidents. Most are manipulated. You have to understand that the markets are totally rigged. If you think there's a free stock market in the United States, you just don't understand. The stock market is totally rigged by the Plunge Protection Team, the government's so-called working group on financial markets, which is made up of the head of the Fed and the Fed Bank of New York and the COMEX and the CFTC and a number of financial leaders, and they totally rig and manipulate the markets. And they've kept the stock market from plunging, but folks, the stock market's gone nowhere. People have gotten zero return on their money in the last 8 years in the stock market. Even the gold market is manipulated in the short run. Even in the short run, the gold market is manipulated. And the reason gold didn't take off 10 or 15 years ago was because of the powerful manipulation taking place on Wall Street with some of the biggest firms on Wall Street and the Fed, et cetera, et cetera. But they did, like in the 1970s, they did lose control. The stock market, or gold market's got a kind of a life of its own now. Global events are speeding up. We call this the acceleration factor. I'm not quite sure why, but things are moving very, very rapidly today. I would say things are deteriorating very, very rapidly today. And I think the next 2 or 3 years you are going to see more deterioration and more crises than most people will be able to handle or digest or understand. So there is this acceleration factor that's taking place. There is a battle for world domination that's in process today, and it's a financial and a spiritual battle as well as a political battle. And if one does not understand all three sides of that battle, then one will have a distorted or very incomplete view of the world. And that's one of the reasons, I think, why most people on Wall Street get it wrong. They just don't have a real total perspective. So we try to, in our analysis, in our writings and speakings, we try to help people understand all three sides of that situation. Politicians, monetary economic authorities, and people on Wall Street will lie without hesitation to protect their own interests or their own agenda. And I was recently, and I think I actually wrote a little article for my newsletter on it, that we live in the liar society. Everybody lies to everybody. The people on Wall Street are continually lying. The people in the Fed, the people in the government, the politicians on the campaign trail who are running for president now, they lie, and the average American can't see it. And some people will accept it because the people are telling them, the liars are telling them what they want to hear. So we do live in a time when the truth is very, very scarce, and unfortunately is becoming more scarce with every day that passes. Ignore what the politicians say, but watch what they do. And let me tell you something, if you go back and look at the records of some of the people who are running for president right now, it's downright scary. These people could care less about the Constitution or our freedoms or whatever. So watch out what they say, ignore what they say, but watch what they do and have been doing. And there's a track record for all of these people. The next 10 years will witness a tremendous loss of freedom in this country, and that is my greatest concern. I think the middle class is probably going to get wiped out. And I think people are going to lose a tremendous amount of their wealth that they've spent their whole lifetimes building up. But you know, that's not even my greatest concern. My greatest concern is that what we're leaving for our children and grandchildren is going to be a legacy of no freedom. I think there are attacks on our freedom that are accelerating, that are unbelievable. Throughout history, the bearer of bad news has been unpopular. In the ancient world, such people were actually stoned. And that doesn't mean they were taking too many drugs. It means they killed them because they didn't bring the news that people wanted to hear. Look at the attacks that took place on Ron Paul when he was giving economic truth, the most knowledgeable man in the U.S. Congress, on the true condition of the financial world. And not only was he ignored, but he was discredited. They hung all kinds of nasty labels on him. And that's called argumentum ad hominem, argument against the man. Attack somebody, put a nasty label on him so no one will listen to him. And they've done it to Ron Paul, but they did it to Cicero in the Roman Empire and to a lot of people who have tried to stand up and speak the truth over the years. Hosea 4:6 says, "My people perish from lack of knowledge." And even though there's an awful lot of information floating around in our country today, real knowledge, discernment, and understanding, and the ability to join the dots is pretty well missing in our time. And Proverbs 27:12 says, "The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and suffer for it." The prudent are the small remnant of people who still have the ability to think and discern and join the dots. And the simple, I think, are the great masses who are clueless, who are absolutely clueless and don't have any concept of what's going on. So I think there's application in our day for that verse.